Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. My name is Andy.
And I'm Craig.
What are we talking about today, Craig? I don't know why I'm asking this. Yeah, we've got several episodes deep now at this point. I feel like I've been inceptioned into Wales in Sheepshand, in Leekshand.
Well, livestock's a pretty good hint of what's to come. Although we're actually heading to a cattle farm today. Any guesses where?
It's in Wales, right? Please tell me it's in Wales. None of that makes sense otherwise.
Yes, it's Wales. So it's not far from Broadhaven. And we're going to spend the episode with a family by the name of Coombs. And I actually came across this story because of the story Harvest, which we did recently for the Patreons.
Subtle plug. Sign up to Patreon for a Wextra episode.
So our main source today is this book here, which is called The Uninvited. So I'll quickly say, actually, my camera's over there now. I forgot I moved it, Andy.
Excellent.
Right. From what I gather, if you want to read this book, get this version. Don't get the more recent looking cover because apparently it's full of typos and mistakes and it's really badly written, even though it's the same author.
And all books look cooler that are older. Like on your bookshelf, you just want older looking books. It makes you look, smarter.
If you look at all the negative reviews for this book, it's all about the editing and typos and stuff, and people just can't get past that. So if you can get hold of the original copy, which didn't take me that much effort to be honest, then do that. So anyway, yeah, the other stuff I've taken from the book we did the other day, which was the Welsh Triangle by Peter Paget. And as we mentioned last time as well, is some of this is covered by Encounters on Netflix. So we've kind of got a few sources this time. So this story is true. You'll wish that it wasn't. It began with a bright light high in the night sky.
It's so bright and milky white, shining down upon the ground.
I was hoping you'd have had like a pie to the side and just gone poof, and then done the whole episode.
I should have done. I absolutely should have done.
The mother of the Coombs family, Pauline, initially thought it was a flare, what would then be near a military site, as we established last time. And Pauline and her family were used to all sorts of lights as they'd lived there for 8 years already. There wasn't much they hadn't seen, but this was different. She'd been washing the dishes when it appeared, a blinding white light hovering eerily near the cliff edge, swaying like a malevolent pendulum. Pauline felt a chill crawl down her spine. It wasn't just a light, it was watching, waving. "Billy," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "You've got to see this." But it was gone, vanished as quickly as it appeared. That night, sleep eluded Pauline. The image of the pulsating light haunted her dreams. Its silent, watchful gaze burned into her memory. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was just the beginning. A few days later, while sipping her morning tea and scanning the local paper, a headline jumped out at her. More Welsh UFOs. Could that be what she'd seen last night? A UFO? Surely not. When Billy returned home, he chuckled at her concerns. "You've been reading too many comics, love," he teased. Yet a strange unease lingered in his own eyes. "Something weird is definitely going on," he admitted. "I was down the coast path, and the military were everywhere. Trucks, soldiers, frogmen. They cordoned off the area saying they were rebuilding the coast path, but since when do the military repair coast paths?"
Days later, a chilling encounter occurred. Mark Matthews, the nephew of the Coombs, was out collecting birds' eggs in a nearby field as the sun began to set. He witnessed an extraordinary sight. A glowing red saucer-shaped object hovering near a large silage container. From this object, a towering figure emerged, at least 6 feet tall, clad in shimmering silver suit. It wore boots, gloves, and a helmet that completely encased its head. Mark watched in disbelief as the figure climbed over a nearby gate. Fear gripped him as he realized the figure seemed to be following him. Glancing back, he saw it stop near a streetlight. In the dim light, Mark could make out the figure's head. It was square-shaped, with a black face and an antenna protruding from one shoulder. Terrified, Mark fled home, sobbing uncontrollably. Later, when Mark returned to the field with his father, they discovered a massive boot print in the mud, approximately 12 inches long. You can actually hear Mark tell his own chilling account of the encounter on the Netflix show that we mentioned, Encounters.
Over the next few weeks, a strange unease settled over the farmhouse. Electrical faults became commonplace. Bulbs flickered and died, fuses blew with alarming regularity. Even the repairmen were baffled. 2 televisions had inexplicably overloaded, their wiring reduced to a charred mess. Each time, Leon, their youngest, would wake up screaming, whispering about a shadow man that had visited her room. Pauline had thought it was a dream, while Leon had insisted she was fully awake at the time. Clinton, their oldest son, had also reported hearing a strange humming sound emanating from outside that seemed to seep into the very fabric of the house. One Saturday, Pauline was driving home after dropping off one of the kids' friends, her twins peacefully asleep in the back and her son, Kieran, in the passenger seat beside her. Pauline noticed Kieran was unusually quiet.
"All right, love,"
she asked.
Oh, sorry, Mum. It's just... What's that? He pointed towards the horizon. I've been watching it for ages.
The light. It was back.
"Oh, I don't know.
Pauline said, trying to sound unconcerned.
Probably just a star or a plane."
Can't be, Kieran insisted. Stars don't sway around like that.
As they neared their driveway, the light intensified, growing larger, brighter. It was moving swiftly towards them.
Ma, it's getting brighter. It's moving towards us. Kieran cried, his voice rising in panic now.
The light, now an ominous orange globe, loomed closer, seemingly intent on colliding with their car.
Ma, do something! Kieran screamed.
Pauline braced herself for the impact, but the object swooped over them, bathing the car in an eerie, pulsating light.
"Dear God, what was that?"
she gasped.
Ma, it's turning around. It's coming back. It's following us. Kieran was shrieking.
The car sputtered, the engine coughing and dying. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the eerie glow of the pursuing light.
"Ma, make it stop."
The twins in the backseat were now sobbing uncontrollably. Pauline's mind raced. They were stranded, alone on a dark country lane. Where had the light gone? Above them? Hovering? Waiting? But for what?
"Kieran, climb into the back and grab the twins. Get out as fast as you can. I'll follow."
She fumbled with the door handle, her hands trembling. Darkness pressed in on them, suffocating, and they ran for the house.
"Billy, open the door, please, hurry."
A bewildered Billy opened the door, his face etched with concern. Bloody hell, what's the matter? What happened to you? Pauline stumbled inside, clutching her children to her. It followed us, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What followed you? Billy demanded, his eyes wide with alarm. He told Pauline to get inside with the kids. He and Clinton would go and check on the car. As they approached, the sight that met them both was terrifying and awe-inspiring. The car sat silently in the lane, bathed in an eerie, pulsating glow, while the orange orb hovered menacingly above it. What the hell is that thing? Billy muttered, fear creeping into his voice. The light, as if sensing their scrutiny, darted away, high over the house towards the cliff edge in the distance. Billy checked the car. Dead. Completely dead. So him and Clinton silently wheeled it back to the house. Bit of TV, love? Pauline asked, trying to lighten the mood. Not possible, Billy said, his voice grim. Just before you came home, the TV burnt out, just like the others.
Over the following weeks, Billy, usually cheerful, became increasingly irritable. Clinton, normally outgoing, became withdrawn. Even the twins, usually mischievous, grew subdued. No mechanic could explain why the car had burned out. All non-copper parts were severely burnt. Similarly, engineers were baffled by the repeated failures of the televisions. Despite thorough inspections, no wiring faults could be found within the house. The family also began experiencing electric shocks from the taps, and their electricity bills skyrocketed. The electrician, after a thorough inspection, reported no visible faults in the wiring. However, he noted an unusually high energy consumption. To investigate, he turned off the main electricity supply to the house, but despite this, the electricity meters continued to run. The electrician expressed disbelief, stating that it was an impossible and inexplicable occurrence. He concluded that a significant amount of electricity was being drawn from the house, but the source of this energy drain remained a complete mystery.
Billy, while initially skeptical, insisted on having the entire house rewired. The electrician, while unable to explain the phenomenon, had speculated that the house might be experiencing some form of unusual electrical activity like a force field and had said that the whole house was so alive with electricity that he was amazed that someone hadn't been electrocuted already. Despite the rewiring, the strange electrical occurrences persisted. The problems remained unresolved. Shortly after, the Coombs family lost another car due to burnt-out wiring, their fourth in 3 months. A terrifying incident occurred. It was a Friday night. Pauline and Billy had settled down to watch a movie as usual. Suddenly, the peace was shattered. Car headlights swept across the driveway, illuminating the house for an extended period. Pauline tried to ignore it, fearing she'd wake Billy. But then, something shimmered just out of view by the bay window. "What is it, love?" Billy mumbled, waking up. "Jesus Christ, what's that?"
Pauline turned to see what had startled him. Her blood ran cold. Standing in the window, illuminated by the lights, was a colossal figure, at least 7 foot tall. It dwarfed the window, reaching almost to the upper floor. The figure was entirely silver, glowing faintly, and its head was obscured by a helmet. Pauline could only scream. And Billy yelled at her.
"Go check the kids."
And terror gripped them. Their dog, Blackie, howled, teeth bared, hackles raised. Not knowing what else to do, Billy thrust the dog out the front door, hoping to scare the figure away. But Blackie, however, ran off down the drive, terrified. Billy returned to the living room, and the figure remained in the window. He needed to use the phone. As he reached for it, the figure reached towards the window, and the glass vibrated violently. The whole house shook, and the lights and TV flickered wildly. He called his boss, Richard, who lived at the next farm over, and then the police. But as he watched, the figure simply vanished. Richard arrived first, followed shortly by the police.
"So you believe what happened?"
Billy asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and fear.
"Oh, sure,"
one officer replied.
"We've heard too many reports to dismiss them now. Even our colleagues have seen things. Besides, we've never seen anyone as scared as you two are." "But aren't you going outside to investigate?"
Pauline asked the police officers.
"Sorry, love, no way.
One of them replied.
We wouldn't know what we were looking for." "You're scared too, aren't you?"
Pauline asked, her voice trembling.
"Well, let's just say you could do us a favour and leave the door open while we look around,"
the officer said with a nervous laugh. The following morning, when the family inspected the area where the being had been seen, the leaves of a nearby rosebush were brown and burnt looking on the side nearest where it had been stood.
Is that giant being not similar to the case in the last episode?
Yep. Almost identical, in fact. Stephen Taylor. Although it's worth probably mentioning now that later on a guy did come forward claiming that he hoaxed the whole thing. He stole a firefighting suit from a nearby oil refinery.
Dick move.
Yeah, I don't know whether he really did, but that's what he says.
Yeah. It's an interesting occurrence, actually. You do get occasionally people that come forward years later, say they hoaxed it all, but then it's kind of disproved that they did, like they're owning up to a hoax. It's really weird.
Yeah. There was a clip I was going to play later of Pauline, actually, and she says that it was at the window for 2 hours. And I'm like...
That's dedicated hoax.
Yeah, who's just standing at the window making them vibrate for 2 hours?
I mean, I do that to you occasionally.
Well, yeah. Another thing to mention, actually, is Billy's boss, Richard's. His wife had also experienced the shaking and vibrating windows on the same night as the Coombs did. And she'd also seen a craft land by the greenhouse that she described as being 50 foot across. And she said it looked like an upturned jelly mold.
Well, the sightings didn't stop there. The Coombs continued to be plagued by the appearances of both craft and men. On one occasion, glancing out the window into the dark, Pauline saw a glowing figure gliding silently across the lawn, up the driveway, and past the house. It moved with an unnatural grace, as if floating on air. Even in broad daylight, the children began to report seeing glimpses of the figure, a silver blur at the edge of the field, a fleeting shadow up against the barn wall. The following morning, Pauline woke up unable to move her arm, a sharp pain shooting through it. Her eyes were swollen shut, burning like they'd been exposed to a harsh light. And the children? They complained of itchy rashes on their feet and legs, their skin red and inflamed.
Around this time, Leanne, understandably terrified, asked to stay with her grandmother in Broadhaven. It was during this stay that she confided something chilling to her mother. That previous night, Leon had slept in the mother's bedroom, and she awoke to a rustling sound like paper being shuffled, coming from the doorway. Slowly, she turned her head and saw it, a silver hand, cold and luminous, drifting through the doorway. It reached out, gently touching Pauline's arm, before silently withdrawing back into the darkness. Leon, paralyzed with fear, could only watch as the hand disappeared, leaving her mother sleeping peacefully, unaware of this chilling encounter.
For a while, a fragile peace settled over the farmhouse. The Coombs family tried to avoid the press and the other people who started contacting them, having received abuse when out in public. The earlier media coverage intended to seek help, but instead had turned them into local pariahs. Blackie, the loyal dog, was put to sleep. He'd never been the same since the night of the tall figure standing at the window. He was constantly whimpering, pacing, and showing signs of extreme distress. On June the 7th, 1977, the children were off to a Jubilee party at the next farm. Billy had the cows to deal with, and Clinton remained home while Pauline dropped them off. When she returned, realising she'd forgotten her keys, she rang the doorbell. Good job Clinton was home. Or was he? Why wasn't he answering the door? She rang again. Still nothing. Then a whisper.
Huh?
Clinton, what are you playing at? Let me in.
I thought maybe it was those two men again. Well, not men, not human, I don't think.
What are you talking about?
It turned out that while she was out, two men, or not men as the case may be, had arrived at the house in a silver futuristic car. The men were described as being identical, although one stayed in the car, so I'm not sure how sure he could have been of that, but that's what he says. They wore dark suits. They were tall and thin, with dark, slick back hair and abnormally large foreheads. They glided up the driveway more like spectral figures than human beings. Frightened by these unsettling figures and fearing they were some kind of illusion, Clinton locked the front and back door, and then he barricaded himself upstairs. Having tried the front and back door, the strange visitors went to the neighbour's house.
I'm just appreciating these aliens, like, you know, sort of thinking, oh, this is what a car looks like. This is what humans look like. Let's disguise ourselves and go up. Just gliding up like, hello, fellow human. Well, the neighbour, a nurse named Carol, had described the car as fabulous. Appearing on her driveway with an unnatural silence, no crunch or of gravel as you'd expect going up that drive. The man inquired in a flat, emotionless tone, "Where is Pauline Coombs?" Frightened by this menacing figure, whose face Carol described as strangely mask-like, almost plastic, she told him she didn't know where she was, and they left. No sooner had they gone than Pauline came home. Surely they had passed each other on the driveway.
So who were these men? As in many Men in Black sightings, they are described as not quite right. One theory is that they act and look weird deliberately so that no one would believe you if you told them. This visitation at the farm was also corroborated by a lady named Rosa who owns a hotel in Broadhaven, as well as Stack's Rock, which we'll come back to. Rosa had been having similar sightings as the Coombs family, even seeing craft and beings in the field behind her hotel. Included in the book are multiple phone conversations that, if true, corroborate the Coombs sightings. And shortly after this Men in Black visit at the Coombs farm, Rosa's daughter had been scared by a visit herself, only they were looking for Rosa. Rosa had also been writing to her MP to contact the RAF and get answers to what these craft and beings were that she was seeing.
A few months passed without incident. The family headed peacefully in September. Billy was out ploughing, and he'd given the tractor to Kieran to run. Kieran loved that job, and it was hard to get him to come back in, but Billy was tired from a long day in the sun. It was 5 o'clock, he'd finished early, but where was Kieran? He found him at the farm, looking pale and shaken. "I saw something, Dad, in the house. A black, tall, thin shape moving around in the living room. First to the window, then to the TV, then back again. It felt cold." That night, as the family settled down to watch TV, the set flickered and died, and the screen went black. A week later, as Kieran drove the tractor down to the cowshed, a figure materialised out in front of him. A woman dressed in a long white gown seemed to shimmer into existence. Kieran slammed on the brakes, convinced he'd run someone over, but there was nothing there, no sign of a collision, no skid marks, just a chilling emptiness.
The next weird thing that started to happen revolved around the cows. During breeding season, Billy would spend a lot of time at night with his cows, assisting pregnancy and just generally caring for them. With everything going on these days, he'd become quite nervous about this. He'd unlock the big gates and check every cow in each stall to see their condition. It was a couple of hours' work before he'd checked them all 158. He returned to the forecourt and locked and bolted the gate, and that's when he heard it. The phone was ringing at the house. That's strange, he thought, checking his watch. It's 1 a.m. Who would be calling at this hour? So he ran the short distance to the house to answer the phone to an irate neighbour from a nearby farm.
Billy, what the hell are you playing at? What must be your entire herd has been rampaging over my land for the last hour, eating my crops.
Billy chuckled to himself.
Not mine, Martin, he said. I just left them at the shed to come answer the phone.
But they were his cows. Every last cow that he'd only just locked up was gone from the sheds. Going to round them up, he hopped in the car, but guess what? It was dead. Of course it was. So he walked down to collect the panicky herd. Next morning, he and Clinton would head out to the sheds and let the cows into the field next to it. They threw some hay over the high gates, and no sooner had they turned around than the cows were gone. They were about to begin a search when Clinton pointed out that they were actually locked in the machine room.
One Saturday in November, Pauline was driving with a car full of kids. It was a beautiful autumn day, the sun glinting off the sparkling sea. The drive was pleasant, the conversation light and easy. Then suddenly they saw it. Hovering silently against an azure sky was a perfectly spherical disc. Hovering in the sky, completely motionless. Pauline felt a shiver crawl down her spine. It wasn't just the sight of the object that unnerved her, it was the chilling silence, the way it seemed to hold its breath, observing them. And then it started to rise, slowly, majestically, until it reached maybe about 200 feet, and then shot off across the sky towards the cliff's edge, disappearing behind a rocky outcrop known as Stack's Rocks, before reappearing, circling around the rocks, and then it flew straight at the rocks once more. They expected an explosion, but instead the rock face opened up like a sliding door, and the craft disappeared inside. Intrigued by where it had gone, Pauline and the kids decided to investigate. They headed out into the fields and went along the coastal path, following the direction the disc had taken towards Stack Rocks. Now, we mentioned Stack Rock in the last episode as being the access for part of a secret alien facility. And it also happened to be owned by Rosa at the hotel.
What they saw next defies belief even more. A tall, maybe 10 to 12 foot, silver-suited being descending, almost as if gliding towards the water's edge. And higher up, standing half in shadow, a second figure. But wait, it wasn't a shadow, it was stood in a sliding doorway. Pauline's blood ran cold. A wave of dizziness washed over her. It's at this point the fear really hit Pauline, as she realised the figures were looking in her direction. She'd been so stupid. If we can see them, then they can see us. So hurriedly, she gathered the kids and rushed back to the seeming safety of the farm.
Now, as crazy as this sighting sounds, when they got home, a phone call from Rosa at the hotel confirmed that she had seen it too. The craft, the figures, the shimmering doorway, everything. Rosa's voice was trembling, laced with fear. Now, there's also a scuba diver mentioned in the Welsh Triangle book that says he was diving near Stack's Rock when a hatch opened in the rock and something came out and tried to grab him, tearing his wetsuit. He escaped, vowing never to return to that spot again. So the family continues to witness craft that would disappear into the water near Stack Rock. Billy continued to nervously deal with his cows whenever it was dark. Clinton refused to help now after dark, and the cows themselves seemed perpetually agitated. On a routine check one night, the cows had disappeared again, over 100 of them, just gone while everything remained locked up and shut as it should be. A neighbouring farmer had rushed down to say that the cows had suddenly appeared in his yard. The same thing happened 3 times over 10 days. Billy was at breaking point. 2 cows and 3 cars in this time had just disappeared completely while grazing in the field that overlooked Stack's Rock.
On another occasion, as he headed towards the farmhouse, Billy saw something that chilled him to the bone. 2 shimmering columns of light, almost humanoid in shape, drifting silently up the driveway and vanished into the night. And then came the visitors, a Norfolk farmer called Paul Palmer and his fiancée, who seemingly thought he knew what was happening to the Coombs. Paul believed their location was the significant part of all that was going on, the proximity to the army base, but we've already discussed that. He also mentioned that the site is on the crossing point of a number of ley lines. It's worth noting here as well that Peter Paget in the Welsh Triangle mentions that the farmhouse is also situated on an old barrow, an ancient burial mound, which could further amplify any unusual energies.
It's the Fae.
So Paul also theorized that the Coombs family could have provided a good opportunity for the study of human life, a remote mixed family group of varying ages.
Now, Paul had a dream while on the farm. He was looking down over the farm, over Broadhaven, towards the RAF Bordy. In the distance, he could see a gathering cloud of gas, an unnatural, ominous green hue. He felt a wave of fear wash over him, fear for the people, and wished to warn them of what was coming, but he felt paralysed, unable to act. Was this a warning of some impending disaster? During Paul and his fiancée's visit, they helped move over 86 cows to the paddock opposite the shed, and 14 into a smaller paddock. They continued their tour and visited a newborn calf from the night before, returning to the empty paddocks. That's right, empty. All 100 cows were gone again. They found them at the farm half a mile up the road and returned them to their rightful place, only for it to happen not 15 minutes after they collected them. Again. Martin Chambers called, irate, informing them that the cows were back in his yard yet again.
An event with similar characteristics had occurred in the northern desert area of Chile in South America. A 7-man unit of the Chilean army on cavalry patrol in the desert area was camped overnight when at 10 minutes past 4 in the morning, the man on duty suddenly saw 2 bright lights in the sky. They immediately woke the commanding NCO, Corporal Armando Valdez, who roused the rest of the men in order that they might observe the 2 brilliant objects, which had now dropped towards the desert and were hovering some 500 yards from their camp.
And then what happened?
Apprehensively, Corporal Valdez ordered his men to stand shoulder to shoulder and not move, while he himself edged slowly towards the lights, which were now so brilliant that they illuminated a large area of the surrounding foothills. And then he disappeared.
Wait, he disappeared?
Yep. Witnessed by all 6 of the men looking on, their corporal completely disappeared into thin air. The men, perplexed and uncertain what to do, stood their ground and followed their instructions. They called out to their companion, but there was no reply. However, quite without warning, and only 15 minutes later, he just reappeared near to the lights where he had vanished. And as the soldiers remember,
he came towards us and he was laughing, and then he lost consciousness and slumped to the ground. When he recovered, he stood up, looked at us as if he did not know us, and kept repeating, "The light, the light." Then in a strange, flat voice he said,
"You will never know who we are or where we came from, but we will return again."
After that, he shook his head a couple of times and returned to normal.
More than this, in the short 15-minute period that Armando Valdez had been absent, he had grown a considerable beard, and his wristwatch had advanced by 5 days.
Nah, that's impossible, no. Really?
So concerned were the Chilean authorities over the incident that they initially banned the printing of the story from the newspapers. But as the story leaked out, they withdrew their press censorship and allowed the men to be interviewed by Professor Pedro Araneda of Arica University. The professor stated,
"The men were apparently completely sincere in describing what they believed they saw. Whatever happened, and whatever the explanation may be, it must have been an extremely unsettling experience."
Well, on that unsettling note, back to Wales. That night, the night that Paul left, the 18th of December 1977, Pauline couldn't sleep. The events of the day, the unsettling encounter with the men in black, Paul's chilling dream, and the inexplicable disappearance and reappearance of the cows had left her feeling deeply unsettled. A sense of dread, cold and pervasive, clung to her like a shroud. It was useless. She adjusted her position slightly. The more she tried to sleep, the more awake she felt, and somehow more agitated and nervous. That shaft of light from the landing didn't help either, illuminating her pillow like a spotlight. It just missed her face, thank goodness, but it lit up the backs of her hands and her forearms as brightly as day. She focused on the back of her hand, studying its contours and pores in the skin, its blemishes, the perfect arrangement of little hairs. She smiled to herself. Why bother with counting sheep? We can just count the little hairs on the back of your hand. She let her gaze wander down and along her forearm. Suddenly, something shimmered. A thin, transparent tube hovering above her forearm, a tiny metal rod protruding from its end. Christ, what was that? She gasped. The light intensified, blinding her. She felt a strange sensation as if she was no longer in her own bed. She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, unresponsive. Slowly, she opened her eyes.
She wasn't in her bedroom. A cold dread washed over her. She was somewhere else, somewhere she didn't belong. She was sitting on a cold, hard bench, a vast, domed ceiling above her, illuminated by a dazzling array of flashing lights. Figures moved in the periphery, tall and slender, with long dark hair and unsettling blank faces. A screen with lights flashing in sequence, red, blue, yellow, green. And further to her right, framed in shadow, she noticed a dim, rectangular glow of an entrance, a doorway, a ramp leading down to what? She inched forward on the bench and leaned outwards to try and make out the detail outside, the source of the dim light that was illuminating the entrance. A ramp? Yes, it was a ramp leading down to, my God, the road, the main road near Ripperston Farm. Surely not. But yes, she could make it out clearly now. It was the road. She recognized it immediately, even from the dim glow that was somehow illuminating the portion of it that she could see. And now, what was this? More shapes, people. There were people approaching the ramp out of the darkness, mounting it, their forms silhouetted against the dim light. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 5, and wait, they were, yes, human, all women like her. But who? Did she know them?
Anyone that's heard the Patreon episode, the most recent one, may have just got chills at that, with the women and domed ceilings. But then, just as suddenly, it was gone. She was back in her own bed, Billy sleeping peacefully beside her. The shaft of light from the landing still illuminated the room, but now it seemed normal, even a little comforting. She closed her eyes, trying to shake off the lingering feeling of unreality. Was it a dream, a hallucination, or something more?
The last time that they saw it, the family was in the car. A bright yellow light was just moving swiftly across the sky, and then it stopped. It just stopped, hung there motionless for what seemed like an eternity. And then, with a sudden jolt, it shot vertically upwards, disappearing into the blue of the twilight sky.
And then it just vanished?
Then it dropped back down towards the farm. It descended slowly at first, then with increasing speed until it hovered directly above the cowshed. It was immense, a ball of orange light pulsating with an eerie energy. It was just like the sun had shrunk and landed in their field.
They were quite afraid then.
No, not at first. All the fear, all the panic, it just vanished. They were mesmerized. Pauline commented that it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And then it started to move again, swaying gently like a giant luminous pendulum. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it shot upwards, shrinking rapidly until it was just a point of light disappearing into the vastness of the night sky. They returned to the house in silence, the image of that incredible light seared into their minds. And over a cup of tea, Pauline told them about the night before.
A dream, surely?
Billy asked, his gaze falling onto a small, almost imperceptible puncture mark on Pauline's forearm.
Ooh. That's, again, referencing the Patreon episode, hint, there is some similarities to that one as well as other bits in the Welsh Triangle.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do all three together, because they all have similar things. And you could argue that maybe in the one we did for Patreon that they'd read these cases as well and were influenced by that, I guess.
Potentially, yeah.
But yeah, that's where the story ends in the Uninvited book. They don't really give a conclusion to it in the Welsh Triangle, other than to say that they eventually move away from the farm. So, what do you reckon? Do you believe him?
I mean, it's got corroboration from other neighbours, by the sounds of it. You know, it's got people that can back up bits of that story at least. I don't know.
Certainly, Rosa at the hotel. Again, in the Netflix, we're not paid, unfortunately, by Netflix. But in their documentary, the Rosa, the hotel owner, isn't alive anymore, but her daughter talks about it on that show.
Oh, okay.
And she is interviewed directly in Peter Paget's book, The Welsh Triangle. So there's definitely some corroboration that happens. It's not like Pauline says, "Oh, my friend down at the hotel said this." Like, the people that are writing the books have spoken to Rosa as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think some weird shit was definitely going down in the sort of mid-70s in Wales. It's in some ways, this does seem like a bit more of a sexed up version of a lot of the Welsh Triangle stuff.
Yeah, I think this is, shall we say, a dramatization of the account that happened. So I've based what I've written mostly on what was on the Uninvited, but there are some differences. Oddly, it sings like names that are different in both accounts. Oh yeah, I mentioned earlier there was a clip of Pauline that I could play as well, which might be worth bringing up. Shall I do that now?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, anyway, these people are interested in the your experience.
Yeah. Mrs. Coombs has seen things disappear into St. Bride's Bay and watched flying silver and orange balls pass her farm.
And then after that came the silver-suited man, which was the most terrifying experience of it all.
Where did he appear?
In my window, there were those people standing now. Excuse me. He was about 7 feet tall, and the width of the window, which is 3 feet wide, and he was there for about 2 hours.
Also, so despite what I sort of said previously on the other episode about Peter Paget and his book, The Welsh Triangle, I think the accounts of things from this story in Peter's book seem more credible.
Yeah,
like the way
I get
it's written,
that. Yeah,
and the details and stuff. As I say, I think this is probably more of a dramatization, but that, you know, they do the main points of the story, if you like, remain the same in both versions.
Yeah.
It's just the names and stuff really that change. And there's mention of another daughter in Uninvited that lives with the grandmother, but she's not mentioned in the Welsh Triangle. The only place I can find, because I tried to find out, obviously from Google, whether these people still exist. There's someone on an Amazon review for the book.
Yeah.
That claims to be married to this other daughter.
Oh, really?
Which I thought was a weird boast.
Yeah.
And they said that the family don't really speak about what went on, and so they read the book. So if we believe that review, then this other daughter did exist as well. But
well, I mean, if was the other daughter, I'm guessing living with her grandmother, wasn't really involved apart from hearing about it maybe from her family.
Yeah, there is one story that involves the grandparents and this other daughter, but in the Welsh Triangle and the version we've told, it doesn't involve them at all. So I don't know. It's like the Uninvited added extra characters for some reason, but it also left out details. So like it tones things back. So it doesn't mention the craft flying into Stax Rock with the sliding doors. You'd think if it was like a dramatization, it would like big these things up, but it doesn't. So I don't know what to make of it. Like from what I can tell, Clive Harold, I mean, I can't find much about him. I found one website that pointed to a YouTube video that claims that it's him from 1997, and that seems to be the last reference to Clive Harold.
Okay.
So I don't know if he's passed away. It's a really, I don't see how the person would know that it's that Clive Harold. It's a guy called Clive Harold. And it's actually a clip of, at the time, Prince Charles at a Big Issue place. And he's talking to a homeless man that claims he used to go to school with Prince Charles. And that homeless man is supposedly Clive Harold.
Damn.
So if it really is him, then he fell on hard times for whatever reason. And then he just seems to have disappeared. Which is slightly odd in itself. Because it's the same, like if you Google Peter Paget, because he's like said he was an agent. So you try to find out anything about him and you can't. But then that also confirms that he might be a secret agent.
Secret agent man.
Or he made it up and he hasn't done anything like that, and that's why.
But people have a footprint online, right? Especially authors. Like you can find them, but he doesn't have that much out there.
When was his last book out?
I think he started to republish stuff like the Welsh Triangle in about 2018.
Okay.
He's gone quite online. So he's got a YouTube channel. It's only got 6 or 7 videos on it where he addresses people and 5G and stuff. And he gives out his personal email address. So the only thing I can think of, because even that hasn't been updated for years. So I wonder, and his Facebook page hasn't been updated either. I might pop an email and see if he responds, because in the video, he says he always responds to emails. So, although I did find it odd that a former secret agent uses a Yahoo email address.
Well, you know, you're not going to have at mi6.gov.
Yeah, I guess. But I don't know. There's more secure. Like I use Proton Mail, which is fairly heavily secure email client. I think it was created by some of the scientists at CERN.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just checking my notes if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, so one thing that Peter mentions in his epilogue that I forgot to bring up last time, but that ties in with the Patreon episode as well, is that he claims that children are being harvested for food for the Greys.
Really?
Which again, you could argue ties in with the other episode, but we don't know whether that lady maybe had read that. And
yeah, exactly. Because I mean,
it's
her
hard
account
to
was
confirm.
a lot later.
Yeah, it's hard to confirm.
Should we do some weird news? Do you want to chat about this a little bit more?
No, I think we've probably covered everything we need to cover, right? I mean, where do we stand now? So we've done 3 episodes on the Welsh Triangle.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think something weird was happening at that point in Wales. It might have been military. It might have been a case of mass hysteria of sorts. I'm not convinced by all of that. But, you know, the fact that there are some people like Rosa backing up Pauline and Billy's stories, and I'm assuming Kieran didn't change the story of the twins or anything like that for what they remember. So I think they did see something. I think they're experiencing something. But, you know, whether it was tall, sort of slim aliens coming and messing with their cows.
Yeah,
what do you reckon?
Because it's like the fact that they disappear into obscurity and don't want to talk about it anymore. Kind of, you'd think they'd be on the circuit, as it were, trying to make money from it, but they don't. They just carry on, I guess, farming or whatever. And
yeah,
but it's
which always makes you
unclear.
believe a little bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's unclear how much kind of input they had into the book, The Uninvited. I don't know how much say they had. Actually, that's one other final point, because I could keep going around in circles with this. There is one thing Peter mentioned in the Welsh Triangle, that he was once at the farm at the same time as Clive Harold. So they did cross paths.
Okay.
And on the day that Clive Harold left to go back, I think he said he had to go back to London or something, there was an incident where the cows transported. So they were at the farm while it happened on one occasion.
Damn.
Again, obviously, it depends how much we want to believe Peter. Sorry, Peter, if you're listening. I'm sure. Let's address Peter directly. I'm sure you can understand that these things are quite hard to swallow, shall we say. They're very out there ideas. So, yeah.
Yeah, if please feel free to come and clear them up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think something obviously was happening. I think it's probably a combination. There's military training, there's mass hysteria, as we've mentioned before. There's potential for a hoax at the window. I don't know. Like to see a glowing object above a cowshed the size of the sun. I don't know any of our military craft that look like that.
Well, it's yeah,
Ball
people,
lightning.
yeah, ball lightning. I mean,
It comes up all the time.
people remember things differently as well. Like sort of, and as it's like when that bit where Kieran's saying, stars don't sway like that. They do if you're standing by West Kennet Longbarrow trying to make a
Yeah, exactly.
podcast.
We've seen that.
So
Stack Rocks doesn't open up like that apparently, but
well, I don't know, maybe we need to go there at some point, see if we can find the entrance.
it's on my list.
Need some abseiling gear.
I mean, that stuff does tally with what Peter says about there being a secret underground base in that area. And then you've got multiple witnesses saying that they saw sliding doors open on a rock. It's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
It's the only way to describe it. It's fucking weird.
That's like some Tracy Island shit right there.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to take some shovels when we go as well, so we can dig down into it from the top of it.
I need to dive. You dive and then they'll open the doors and try and grab you like that diver.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
Yeah.
Don't know.
So we've not done this before, but since we've recorded, I actually reached out to Peter Paget via email. I didn't expect to get a reply, but within 5 minutes of sending the email,
I was going to say replies we got.
We certainly did. Now Peter was kind enough to reply to the email, and initially was trying to be quite helpful, but some concerning information has come to light since we recorded. So we just thought we'd do this as a little end of episode update. But before I talk about that, I thought I'd read you his email, which he has given me permission to do, but I have cut. Believe it or not, this is quite long, and I've cut quite a lot of things. But I think it's only fair. So
yeah, no matter what else, we do appreciate the fact that he did take that time to get back to us.
Yes. Also, initially he did say he'd come on the podcast, which we could have done this as a thing, and then apparently he's now saying that he's not allowed to come on the podcast because
he might have listened.
Agent man.
Or maybe he listened.
Well, yes. So his email starts, "Hi guys, I made a point of reviewing your Welsh Triangle episode 40, and it was quite entertaining, which maybe is what you were trying to achieve. But at 33 views, including mine, you have not yet cornered the world market. However, I wish you well. But to help you, as I do have 62 years of experience in these matters, and dare I say, won the Royal Television Society's Award for Regional Television in the 1980s with a considerable footprint, allow me to guide you a little." He's been very helpful. I have been told that apparently people don't win that award, and it's actually companies that win it. But
well, I've had an award with a company before that I've like, yeah, that was mostly me. Probably wasn't in my case, and maybe not his. I don't know, but
So anyway, back to his email. So first, the major part of the podcast was good and accurate and engaging, but then tried to keep the accuracy going and not just drift off into opinion overriding facts, please, as you lose credibility there. With regard to Coombs, be aware that Uninvited was a plagiarism by Clive Harold, a Fleet Street hack who came down there for just a few days and wrote a faction that is a mix of fact and fiction to enable his storyline. In that, in quotation, story, I appear as Paul Palmer. There's a bit of a revelation there because we did talk about Paul Palmer, the farmer. Exactly, apparently that's Peter. I had to sue Clive sometime later for his film script of that stolen book, and he kind of disappeared.
It is worth noting that anyone can attempt to sue anyone. It doesn't necessarily mean he won. He might have won. He wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, there is that. Also, when he says he disappeared, is he implying he killed him?
Yeah, or like had him taken away, or he sort of left in shame after losing the court case. I don't know. I don't know.
We established that he was probably became homeless, and then we're not sure what happened to him, right? So
yeah,
that's as far as we got. So yeah, he disappeared. So be aware if using that material of his that you're on very thin ice indeed. It was always my intention to protect the Coombs, who had a lot of negative publicity at the time, quite unjustified, as they were a simple farming family caught up in very bizarre events. I really appreciate you taking the time to examine these affairs, and a lighter-hearted approach is always good, but be aware that these events touch on very serious matters and very sensitive ones. If you run with the current revelations and try to stay on track to where this is all leading, you could majorly expand your footprint and have fun along the way. But don't come out just looking as if you're engaged in introverted self-entertainment, as you both have talent and research ability and could make much more of your podcast than it currently is just amateur.
Ouch. Ouch. Wow. That cuts deep. Tell it like it is, Peter.
Ask any email questions that you wish, and if allowed, I will try to answer them, but you're in deeper than you realize, and the jokey things does protect you from being taken too seriously. Kind regards, keep searching, Peter Paget. As I say, I've taken some of it out, not for any censorship reasons. It was just a very long email. So I've kept it to the main important details, which is talking about us. So, few points myself, and I don't know if Peter's even going to listen to this. So, hi, Peter, if you're listening. So he claims we lose credibility by expressing our own opinions, but this is our show.
Yeah.
And we are entitled to have perspectives, right?
I mean, there are certain facts that I think you need to meet, but also I think it's our duty to do that when they are actually proven facts. And that is the wonderful thing about folklore, about UAPs and UFOs, about ghosts, poltergeists, anything like that. It isn't really fact, and that's the whole point. We're supposed to give an opinion, or at least that's what we set out to do. We talk about it, we decide what we think of it, and we do have a bit of a laugh, I like to think.
And we don't take ourselves too seriously. I mean, come on, look at this guy.
I was gonna say, yeah, right? I think you've got. There are more serious podcasts out there that do that sort of thing. That sort of take themselves a bit too seriously, in my opinion. But yeah, that's not us.
Exactly, and we got to be true to ourselves, right? So,
unless there's money involved, in which case I will do literally anything.
You heard him, guys. Start signing up to Patreon now.
That higher tier of Patreon. But no, seriously.
The only Andes.
Yeah. Oh no. There's as you say, we got to sort of keep true to what we're trying to do, really, and that, as you say, ultimately is our podcast.
And in the early days, I was criticized by holding back a little bit and not having an opinion or being scared to have an opinion. I was told, actually, you are entitled to have an opinion. That's allowed. And so that's what I do.
I mean, I think we've mentioned this before earlier on, but when we first started doing this, I was really hoping that, Craig was going to be the Mulder to my Scully, but we're both a bit Scully, really, aren't we? we both fall on the side of skepticism. So there's less of that back and forth in terms of what we, sort of one of us is more of a true believer than the other. We get a little bit of it, but I think, it still works.
Yeah. Secondly, his own credibility, I think, is undermined by the fact that many of his claims are vague and difficult to verify. Like all these things about different awards or assassination attempts or anything like that, we're apparently supposed to take Peter's word for it.
Yeah.
But there's never anything that can verify that. And he goes, well, of course there's not. I'm a secret spy. It's like, well, then that's your fucking trump card. We can't do anything. What's the point?
That's it. I would tell you, but I'd have to kill you. But seriously, and again, come back to my point. It's one of those things that and if it's just your word, sort of, I like to try and give people the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, there's no way we can actually verify it. So we've got to treat it as unverified.
I'm sorry, Peter, but I don't buy most of what you say, to be honest.
That was me thinking I was going to come into this one being the savage one, Craig.
No, so here was kind of the kicker for me. And as I say, I don't want this to be too long. It's probably a bit waffly, and I expect people have already turned off, right? But
some people
I would say
like
one
bitching,
thing.
man.
So does appear that Peter Paget may be an alias of another person called Peter Fisher.
Yes.
Which obviously, as a spy, he's got multiple aliases. But Peter Fisher was convicted of defrauding the benefit system, operating
85?
two business whilst claiming benefits. £85,000, which he was prosecuted for. As far as I can tell, he pleaded guilty. Sometimes you'll see him online saying that he wasn't charged. He was. I think he had something like a 15-month suspended sentence for
And
it.
did some jail time as well, I think.
So even if he is a spy, he's admitting to have. Well, I suppose he's not admitting, unless you count the fact that under a different alias, he has stolen and he's been prosecuted for stealing taxpayers' money. So our money in the form of fraudulent benefits, right? So surely this is the real reason why he keeps his identity secret. Nothing to do with being a spy, because even if he is a spy, you'd think they would have made all that go away for him, but apparently they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And he still defrauded the system, whether it was through his agency or not. He still did it, which is a fucking dick move. There are people that need that money.
Did we mention his cancer cure last?
We mentioned that the police supposed to have taken the cancer cure from him, which turns out was actually more that he was practicing medicine without a license.
You know, again, as I say, we like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but you know, we just a little bit of digging, and
didn't take much. We're not spies, or are we? Wink, right? And I don't want like some rivalry with Peter. Right, as I say, he's a nice guy. Emailed back, fair enough, but his claims, as we did already mention on the first episode, are a bit hard to swallow. And apparently, for saying that, we are now discredited. But yeah, I don't know what to make of it anymore. Like,
I mean,
initially,
doing a bit of digging around, he does, you know, sort of have a following. I've seen like comments on these old videos that he showed and things like that that are sort of, you know, and things that he pops up in. That you know, you do have people that really believe him, people that are sort of following his story, and you know, I don't want to discredit them too much either, but. You know, these are the facts that we've found that are verifiable to an extent, at least, I guess, more so than I told you so, and you know, just because I said so.
Yeah. As I say, I mean, he's lost credibility to me, which makes most of what he's saying hard to swallow. And so, like, although the story of the Welsh Triangle was initially quite an intriguing story, I was quite excited to do it. Now it's just kind of. It's a bit like Clapham Woods, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, it's Clapham Woods all over again. It's like, oh my god, this place is amazing. Oh no, wait, it's like one or two people making it up.
Yeah,
and you know, and although saying that the Clapham Woods, just like certain other things, all good stories start with a few grains of truth, you know. And you know, I'm sure in this case there probably was a few weird goings on that have been sort of backed up by other people who aren't Peter around Wales, around that area at that time in the 70s, but. You know, it's there's telling that, and then there's sort of running wild with it, and yeah. I appreciate a good story, I do. But as you say, it's when so much of that sort of gets swept from under you in a big sort of wave of, you know, it's yeah, it is a little bit difficult to swallow sometimes.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, there are sources online. There's videos you can see that will really go into a lot of detail about who Peter might really be and about his books and things. Fairly easy to find. You can find newspaper articles, particularly if you look up Peter Fisher. It will come up multiple times. But I thought I'd end, Andy, on a little quote. In the words of Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
I like that. I like it.
So, I guess back to Andy in the studio with some weird news.
So this is from the Metro, and it is we're sticking with the Celtic nations, but we're going up to Scotland.
Are you employed by the Metro? Is that?
It's at least it's not the Sun or something, you know, or the Mail. Mystery over decapitated birds found in remote Scottish town.
Ooh.
Residents were baffled when they found around 20 decapitated birds in Scotland. A cluster of houses beside an industrial estate on the north bank of the River Forth has become a site of mystery since the December 30th discovery. Nothing like this has been seen before in Harbour Way, Alloa, a town of 14,000 people in Clackmannanshire, where the river becomes the Firth of Forth. One resident who asked to stay anonymous told the local paper, in over 7 years of staying in the Harbour Way area, I've never seen scenes like that, like I've witnessed this morning. Occasionally over the previous years, a bird will be found dead in the water, but 15 to 20 dead birds of different breeds, all decapitated and deposited on the silt, indicate a macabre ritual to the suffering and death of birds. Very strange. The Scottish Government has now launched an investigation into whether the dead animals had bird flu. I don't know of any bird flu that explodes birds' heads. Avian flu has many symptoms, including a swollen head. Oh, there you go. I stand corrected. Twisting head or neck and drooping wings. But Royal Society of Protection of Birds does not list headlessness as one of them. The Scottish Government has not explained why they are testing the birds for avian flu or why they have been found decapitated. A spokesman told the advisor as part of the Great Britain Dead Wild Bird Surveillance Scheme, try saying that 3 times, scientific samples were collected from a small number of gulls, seabirds and waders found dead at the location in Alloa to be tested, specifically for avian influenza. Results all should be in about 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, that's about it really. Goes on a little bit to talk more about bird flu, but yeah, I don't know. A bunch of decapitated birds all together. I'm not buying that is bird flu.
Nah, a bunch of dead birds maybe, but decapitated.
Yeah,
That's
definitely
that's bad flu. I mean, I had some bad flu last week.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's that's some folk horror shit right up there. I told Becky that story when I first found it, and yeah, she said if they interviewed me, if I was there, it would say, "Fuck no," and the caption would read, "Becky, a soon-to-be former resident of the town." So I'd nope right out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definite folk horror, beginnings of a folk horror story there.
Mm.
Okay.
Or some sick fucker, anyway.
Or some sick fucker. But, you know, we're Wyrd Wessex. We'll go with the folk horror. What have you got for us?
I got something from the Daily Mirror. I say the Daily Mirror. I'm showing my age. It's not called that anymore. It's just called the Mirror, isn't it, Andy?
I was going to say, all right, Grandad.
Family terrified by paranormal activity and beg counsel for new home after objects fly around.
Damn. Weren't birds. They'd all lost their heads.
A mum told a court paranormal activity in her council home left her terrified for her children's safety as objects in the house flew around. Thomas and Louise Stokes told the High Council in Ireland that their family could not stay at the first house given to them owing to concerns for their health because of a mold problem. However, Miss Stokes told Mr. Justice Garrett Simmons a new property they were moved to has caused her to be fearful for her children due to paranormal activity. The mum told proceedings how since they moved in, numerous objects in the house had been thrown from side to side while doors and a table and chairs were moving in front of their eyes. She claims while making food for her children, objects flew out of the cupboard that she opened. The court heard the council place the family on a transfer list and the offer of a new property was accepted by the Stokes in October. At the High Court, Mr. Justice Simmons struck out the Stokes claim against Leitrim County Council. So he doesn't believe them. Mr. Justice Simmons said the claim before him only related to the first property and that if there were new claims, they would have to be lodged separately. He's passing the buck, isn't he?
He is.
He said the only case before him was in relation to the first house, and this case has come and gone, as it were. He told Mrs. Stokes he understood her concern about the second home experiencing paranormal activity and her fears for the safety of her children, but a third house would mean a new application to the local authority. But we've had that before. Like we talked about where I used to live in Penn Hill and the amount of paranormal activity, and the council used to get exorcists out on the properties. But apparently in Ireland, they just tell you to suck it up.
It's Ireland. Like everything's haunted.
Yeah. So we're going to carry on chatting shit for another 10 minutes or so for the Patreons. But yeah, for everyone else, we'll see you next time, I guess.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. We might be Actually, I don't know if we're going to be moving away from Wales. We might be back in Wales next time. Who knows?
The next case, yes, the next case is going to be in Wales again, but it's not aliens. Some of you have just breathed a sigh of relief, I expect.
Yeah, moving away from aliens, eventually moving away from Wales. A couple of more sort of in-person ones planned as well. But yeah, watch this space. And until next time, stay
Don't blame the
weird.
owls.